So because it's Labor Day, I'm in the pool. So what I wanted to talk about is today is Labor Day and how times have changed with the labor force over the years. Back when my grandfather worked in a corporation, this was probably 80s to the early 90s. He managed about 400 employees. He had to draw up architectural designs. The company he worked for made parts for, say, aircraft and stuff like that. It was a very specific type of company. And he loved his employees. Everybody I've ever spoken to in my entire life that knew of him loved working for him. The reason that's important is because today we don't have many companies that are like that anymore. The companies that we have today, big corporations and so forth, they're not like the little companies that once existed. What we have today are bigger companies. They don't care as much as the employees. They don't give the bonuses companies used to give out. They don't have the pension system companies used to have. When my grandfather retired, he was thrown a huge retirement party. They rented a room on the beach. It must have cost thousands of dollars. They gave him a very expensive parting gift. Everybody in the room got a gift to go home with. It was incredible. I don't see anybody doing that today in a company. So it makes me wonder, what happened? I worked for a corporation for the past 6 years and I got burnt out quick. I was working about 60 to 80 hours a week. There was no pension. There was no bonus program. I did work on commission, but I hardly ever made the commission that they offered because they set the bar so high. No matter how much I spun my wheels, the commission just wasn't attainable. How many of you now work for a company that you're happy with? Do you work for a large corporation? Do you work for a small business? Do you work for a private owner? Does your company have many locations? These are all things to ask because I think it does make a difference when you're an employee in the corporate workforce. One thing I definitely noticed over the past 6 years, when I first started, there were a couple of managers that were old school. They reminded me so much of my grandfather. They were good people. They enjoyed working with their employees. They didn't set up too rigid of a schedule. They were more flexible. And they held parties appropriately. If it was a birthday, they brought a cake. If it was, say, 4th of July, we had a cookout. They had good standards. They had good morals. They had a moral compass. Last 3 years when I worked in corporate America, I noticed that times had changed drastically. They were hiring these managers higher up in the company that were not well versed in the fields they were employed in. So for example, I was in a commission-based role. I had to deal with the public. I had a quota to meet. And I had to write up a lot of reports. The managers didn't have any experience with any of that. So when somebody did leave the company, they started hiring people that had no experience or no knowledge or didn't have the same experience that the rest of us had. It was very difficult to keep our jobs going when you constantly had to train somebody new. Managers didn't offer any help training the person. And I also noticed the new hires would get other perks that the old timers would not get. So fairness is a consideration today in large corporations. I think there is a lack of fairness. I think that managers don't have the discernment that old school managers used to have. I also don't think a lot of the managers today have any talent. They're in a role of managing, say, 20 employees. And they've never been trained to manage employees. And they've never dealt with the public. Now all of a sudden the manager is not only managing 20 people, but he also has to interact with the public. And he has no experience in doing so. it causes problems. The higher up managers today aren't like the old school managers of the 80s and 90s and before. The higher up managers of today are quite different, and therefore they're hiring people that have no experience and they're putting them in managerial roles. And then the downfall starts. It's like a tumbleweed. It starts rolling, and it's rolling downhill fast. Pretty soon the company is going downhill because the manager at the employee level is not trained, and the higher up managers in the corporation don't care. After dealing with that for a few years, I decided enough was enough. I wasn't going to put up with it anymore, so I left the corporate world. You know it's bad when a higher up says, oh, I've never done this type of work before, but they're in charge of managing you and 100 locations where you work. Also, companies today are having trouble finding employees to do the work. I was at my dentist office the other day, and the hygienist said they can't keep hygienists. So it's not just corporations that are changing in this work atmosphere that we have in 2025. It could be your local dentist office. I know anytime I try to make an appointment with my doctor, it's a 6-month wait. If you are somebody higher up in a corporation and you're watching this, I want you to give careful consideration to who you are hiring as managers in this day and age. Watch YouTube videos. Watch all the people walking out of work. Watch all the people quitting corporate America. Watch people like me. I've been to college several times. Guess what? I won't work for a corporation anymore. I think there's going to be big changes coming to corporate America, and not for the better for the employees. I think it's only going to benefit the corporations. And pretty soon, who knows? The way the world is going. However, when I was growing up, I remember there were stores all over this town. You couldn't walk 1 block without seeing 4 or 5 stores. They were everywhere. Today, there's car washes, there's smoke shops, there's donut shops, grocery stores, and hair cutting places, with a sprinkling of restaurants and Dollar Trees, a TJ Maxx, and a Kohl's. We had a mall, and it was bought out. They paid $2 million for it, and it sat and rotted. It is completely empty now. There's no place here to shop. We have to shop online to go get clothing or anything like that, unless we shop at TJ Maxx or Kohl's. So the displacement of workers is also a consideration, because if everything is going online, or if there's nowhere to shop in town, then there's nowhere to work in town. When your child tries to get their first job, there will be no place for them to work. So will corporate America be their worst enemy in their own demise? Strong foundations start with rock solid employees. If you have a corporation and the employees you hire have no experience, and the managers you hire treat your employees awful, then you need to do something about it, or you're not going to be in business next year. Not happy in corporate America? Start looking for your next career. I went back to school when I realized that corporate America was not for me. I was able to quit my job and escape the hamster wheel that corporate America has become. It's summer here still, and the leaves are already falling off the trees. Don't let another season go by without carefully considering your options. Don't stay where you're not happy. Life is too short to watch everybody else grow in their personal lives and career. If you're a qualified candidate and have not been able to climb corporate ladder due to the managers that they hire these days that have no experience or education or no care in the world about their employees, get out now. Grow your roots like the tall oak tree. Clear a path forward for your future happiness and success. Most importantly, happy Labor Day to everyone. Take care.